Hey guys, welcome to my kitchen. It's so good to be with you. Welcome to Swindon, which is where I'm talking to you from. I don't know if you've realised over time that words stick, or at least some words stick with us. I reckon I've heard billions of words in my lifetime, most of which I've forgotten entirely. But just occasionally I hear something that sticks in my brain and lodges there for years. A long time ago, it must have been a long time ago because I was a kid, we were on a walk on a really soggy, wet Saturday afternoon. And as we were walking along, we walked through this huge puddle and one of us slipped and fell. And my dad, who is a brilliant man, turned round and said, "You only fell over because you were being silly." It was a throwaway phrase, but it stuck with me so clearly because 5 minutes later, he slipped and fell in the same puddle and got absolutely soaked. And none of us were brave enough to turn round to him and say, "You only slipped because you were being silly." But we all thought it. And as the years went by, it became a sort of catchphrase when anything went wrong. We used to look at him and think, it only happened because you were being silly. On a more serious note, a few years after that incident, when I was about 13, I heard this guy giving a talk about how to connect with God when life is not working out like you expected it to. And I've heard so many people talk on so many things, but this talk really stuck with me. He spoke on some verses from Habakkuk, a book in the Old Testament of the Bible that I'd never heard about before. It seemed pretty obscure. But in these days now, where life has not worked out over the last few months like I was anticipating it would, I've dug into these verses in Habakkuk and I have found them super helpful. And I'm hoping that as we spend a few minutes looking at these verses now, that you are going to find them super helpful for how to navigate the times that we're living in. Habakkuk was around about 600 years before Jesus. He was a prophet. That meant he heard from God and he spoke out what he thought God was saying, what he believed God was saying. And the book of Habakkuk is basically a conversation between God and him. And Habakkuk starts off in this book by saying to God, "Our country's going to pot, nothing's working out right. God, we're supposed to be your people and it's not working." And God gives him a response that he doesn't expect. He says, "There is going to be an enormous wave of crisis come towards you because I'm going to raise up this superpower that is going to come and invade you." They were called the Babylonians. And Habakkuk's like, "God, this is not the response that I was expecting from you. This is not what I hoped you'd say back to me." And God reassures him that this wave of crisis, the Babylonians, this invasion that's coming, they're not going to have the last word. But the verses that I found so helpful, both then and now, are right at the end of the book of Habakkuk. They're the last 3 verses of the whole book. It sounds a little bit obscure to start with, but just bear with me. This is verses 17, 18 and 19 of Habakkuk chapter 3. Habakkuk says, "Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no fruit, though there are no sheep in the sheepfold and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Saviour. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights." Now it seems pretty obscure because Habakkuk is talking about grapes and crops and sheep and cows. But you see, Habakkuk came from a culture where those were all the marks of success. They were farmers, so they knew if they were doing well, if all that stuff was going well. So when he says that the grapes and the figs and the crops and the sheep and the cows, all of that's failing, he's saying every way that I measure success in my life has gone wrong. All of it, every measure of success has gone wrong. And yet, despite all of that, despite all this stuff not working out like I dreamed it would, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. He makes that decision. I don't know that he felt like it, but he had discovered in the midst of his life really not working out like he had thought that it might do, that there is enormous, lasting, continuing hope to be found in taking our eyes off of our own situation, however serious, however difficult, because our situation ultimately is temporary, and instead fixing our eyes on that is eternal, that lasts, that never gives up, fixing his eyes on God. It seems sort of paradoxical that the worse that life gets for Habakkuk, the more he's wanting to fix his eyes on God. But he discovered that in the middle of super big challenges, fixing his eyes on God brings hope and it brings strength. It's no coincidence that it takes him saying, "Yet I will rejoice in the Lord," before he can say in verse 19, "The sovereign Lord is my strength." He discovers strength and he discovers hope in the middle of huge challenge by taking his eyes off of himself and fixing his eyes on God. I've been doing a few Zoom quizzes while we've been in isolation. That's just a way of passing time and having fun and connecting with people. I used to be a teacher in my previous life, and I went to a Zoom quiz with a load of my old teacher colleagues. I reckon there was probably 35 of us taking part in this quiz. And as I got there, I sort of arrogantly looked around the screen, clocking who turned up, and I thought, I'm not going to win this quiz, but I definitely know I can beat you. I will beat you. I'll probably beat you. I reckon I'll be around the same place as you. At the end of that quiz, when all 35-ish people had marked their own quizzes and added up their own scores, and I can tell you, I was marking my own answers pretty generously, I came last. Last! I was pretty humiliated. And in that silly, trivial little moment, I can tell you, I did not feel like saying, "Yet I will rejoice in the Lord." That was a silly, trivial example. But how much more difficult was it for Habakkuk when he looked at every way in which he measured success in his life? All of them were failing. If your food has run out, if the stuff that you are producing to keep yourself going is running out, potentially he's looking at starvation. And yet, in the middle of that, he's able to say, "Yet I will rejoice in the Lord." Life's hard for him. Life's rubbish for him. But he makes that flip, that switch. "Yet I will rejoice in the Lord." And it's as he does that he's able to say, "The sovereign Lord is my strength." He's not ignoring the fact that life is difficult. He's not thinking, "I'm just going to bury my head in the sand and pretend that all these challenges aren't happening." He names them. He names that his crops are failing. He names that his animals have done badly. He names that every measure of success in his life is failing at the moment. But he has discovered that making that flip, that taking his eyes off of himself, off of his own situation, ultimately brings hope and strength and even freedom through Jesus, through God, in the middle of life's toughest circumstances. I reckon he was discovering what worship is really about. Songs and the right atmosphere and the right vibe and feeling like we're connecting with God. All that stuff's important. All that stuff is helpful. But ultimately, worship is that moment where we take our eyes off of ourselves and we choose to put God first. And when life is full of big challenges like it was for Habakkuk, we don't always feel like doing that. But it's as he makes that decision that he discovers that God is his strength. It's as he makes that decision that he discovers hope and freedom and joy even in the middle of life's most enormous challenges. It almost sounds cold to say, take your eyes off yourself. But here's the blessing as he does that. Here's the blessing as he chooses to fix his eyes on God. That moment of being able to say not only, yet I will rejoice in the Lord, but being able to go on and say, the sovereign Lord is my strength. I wonder what it would look like for you and I this week, day by day, when we're faced with challenges, to make that same decision, to say, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. You know, it's hard making that decision day by day. I know it's hard because I've been doing it over the last few weeks, along with so many people, along with many of you guys, making that decision day in, day out, to say, yeah, I will rejoice in the Lord. But honestly, guys, it's as we do that, it's in those moments that we discover more deeply than we've known before that the sovereign Lord, that God who made the heavens and the earth, is our strength. He's our hope. He's our peace. He's our comfort. Guys, I am praying for you over this next week that whatever your lives look like, however full of joy, however full of challenge, that you will discover more and more that God is your strength. Love you guys. God bless you. Hope to see you again soon. Take care.